MXGP 2021 needs a good launch. If the game has a shit launch like it did last year, I don't think the game's lifecycle is going to last longer than a week. MXGP 2020 had the worst launch in any motocross game I think I've ever seen. As far as I remember, all of the previous milestone games have had good launches, but MXGP 2020 was obviously the worst launch in the history, I think. The main reason for the game being so bad at launch was obviously it was so unfinished, and by the end of the game's life cycle, there was no DLC, zero DLC added to the game at all. The only thing we have gotten with MXGP 2020 has been 4 tracks that should have been in the game at launch, but either they didn't have them finished or they didn't want to make DLC, so they decided to add them in later. Also, with the track editor, we had 1 map at launch, but by the end of the game's life cycle, we had 4. I think we have 4 now, and all those maps should have been in the game at launch. I'm assuming they just did not have the time to finish everything and add DLC and all of that, because they have to make 2 games every year, and that is a big problem because it takes away the time that they have to make these games good and add in a bunch of extra features, DLC, all of that. Also, there was no time trial leaderboards for this game for about, I think it was at least a couple months. It could have been even longer. There was no time trial leaderboards, none for a long time. Even though it's not a huge deal, it should be in the game. The fact that it took that long was pretty concerning, and it made for world records and stuff like that. Kind of hard to go for and not as fun to go for when you couldn't even see your name on the leaderboard. It just wasn't as fun. I also forgot first person was not in the game at launch. How do you not have first person in the game at launch? I believe first person and 2 of the tracks were released about a week after the game came out on PS4 and PC. But if you remember, if you're an Xbox player like myself, you had to wait over a fucking month for first person and 2 tracks. That is fucking pathetic. I think at that point the game should have been delayed, and then two other tracks were added, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks after that, or a month or something like that. So if MXGP 2021 has a launch like last year's game did, the game's going nowhere. It needs a successful launch. It has to have all the tracks in at launch, has to have time trial leaderboards, first person, it has to have everything that these games should have at launch, and it needs to have DLC. There's no excuses. How can you release a $90 game, or $80 game, whatever it is, $60 in US dollars, whatever. How can you release a game that expensive and not have DLC for it, or not have it finished at launch? There's just no excuses for that. If the game releases unfinished, the price should be like dropped, because there's no way you can charge people that kind of money and not have the game finished. So MXGP 2021, it has to have a good launch. I doubt there will be MX of Nations in this game. They didn't promote it in the trailer. I think it's kind of hard to add that into the game because Motocross of Nations happened only like a couple weeks ago, so that does kind of suck. It is cool that Milestone added the legacy tracks or whatever, the 4 tracks. There's Agueda, Ernie, Autobiano, and 1 other track. Those tracks were all on previous MXGP games, and they're bringing them into MXGP 2021 at launch. As far as I know, I don't think you have to pay extra for them. I hope you don't, because you shouldn't have to. That is a great idea, and Milestone should be doing more of that in the future, adding in retro tracks, classic tracks, all of that, because obviously with the 2021 MXGP season, they're not going to a crazy amount of tracks. I believe there's a few tracks that they're doing like 2 or 3 rounds at, so I don't blame Milestone for adding these legacy tracks. It is a great idea because obviously the more tracks, the more replay value the game has. So the game's launch date is, I believe, November 30th, so about a month and a half away. Still got a ways to go. It's probably not going to change too much, the physics and all of that. There is gameplay being released, well, as of today that I'm recording it. The live stream's going on between the YouTubers and all that, so we'll get to see what the game looks like, and whatever the game looks like in that live stream, it's most likely 100% going to look like at launch. All the games always do. But yeah, I just hope this game has a good launch. It needs it. I'm still hyped for the game. I'm gonna have fun with it at launch, probably then get sick of it most likely after a couple weeks or something. But come on, Milestone, you gotta have a good launch. This game needs it. This franchise needs it. I hope the game is gonna be fun until the next Supercross game comes out. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed, and take care.